Interesting. So that brings me to the point of COVID-19. Um, People who have lost loved ones or people who have been through this fear of having COVID, how do you explain the stress and what would you recommend for people who are going through that stress of COVID, losing loved ones, themselves, experiencing it? What would you share with our viewers pertaining to that?
Well, I think when anybody loses somebody that they love, they experience grief. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, unfortunately, grief is the cost of love. So we have grief, but then we also have traumatic grief, where the grief is caused by a trauma, and not only the quick and traumatic death, but people that have lost loved ones due to COVID aren't only dealing with the loss and the grief, they're dealing with not having been able to say goodbye, the feeling that their loved one died alone, that they couldn't be there, that they couldn't hold their hand, that they never got a chance to say goodbye. A lot of times, um, partners and sometimes other family members are struggling with what we call survivor's guilt, that why, we were all exposed, why did this person die and I didn't, or I didn't even get symptoms. So the ripple effect is much bigger than just, oh, we're dealing with grief, or oh, we're afraid of COVID. There are many different layers to um, the grief related struggles that people are dealing with.
That brings me to another question. What would you tell people who are going through that? How should they handle that situation? What should they do?
Well, I'm not a big believer in the word should. I call it, with all due respect, I call it almost that people should all over themselves, and
Yes.
that we shouldn't should, because there is no should. Whatever feels right for that person, that's what needs to be done. People grieve in different ways. One of the things that I've seen so many times is people feeling guilty or saying, I'm a horrible person. This person died and I didn't cry. Well, that doesn't mean that you didn't love them. People grieve in different ways in different times. Sometimes they're just completely shut down and they can't feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain way that people think that they should behave, but you have to do it your own way in your own time. Very often people hold on, and then 2, 3, 4 weeks later, 6 weeks later, we'll watch a movie where somebody dies and all that grief that's been stuffed will come up, and that's okay. I think it's important to let it be what it is. The only thing that I think is very important is the only thing that's worse than grieving is not grieving. And a lot of times, grieving is painful and people don't want to feel it. And so they do whatever they can to not feel it. But again, grief is the cost of love, and we need to feel it and process it, because the only way to get through pain is to actually go through it. You can't put it in a box, and time isn't going to heal it by itself. A lot of times, after a traumatic event or a death, people say all the time to loved ones and friends, well, it's been 5 years, it's been 10 years, you need to just get over it. But you don't get over things unless you've gone through them. You have to process it, and grief doesn't go away on its own. So I think people need to allow themselves to feel it, and I think they need to be very careful of not feeling it. Especially, one of the things that I've seen really escalate during COVID is the day drinking and the day drugging and the self medication of dealing with grief, and homeschooling and not working and all the changes and the stress related to COVID. The day drinking and the day drugging is out of control.